The room was cold, filled with the scent of expensive coffee and the sound of heavy, academic books being flipped. Around the large mahogany table sat some of the most brilliant minds in the industry. Professors, CEOs, and consultants from the world's top capitals. They were all there for one reason: to solve a crisis. As the meeting began, the air became thick with sophistication. One man stood up and spoke for 10 minutes using words like circumlocution, paradigm shifts, and interdisciplinary synergies. People nodded, but their eyes were blank. They were lost in a forest of complex grammar and 5-syllable words. The more he spoke, the more the tension grew. No one wanted to admit they didn't understand him. Everyone was trying to look smart, yet no one was actually communicating. Then, at the far end of the table, a man named Elias stood up. He wasn't wearing a designer suit. He didn't have a PhD from an Ivy League school. He was an immigrant who had learned English while working in a small bookstore. The room went quiet, expecting another wave of complex jargon. Elias took a breath, looked everyone in the eye, and said just 3 sentences. "We are trying to do too much. We need to stop. We need to focus on one thing: silence. Total, absolute silence." In those 15 simple words, Elias did what the experts couldn't do in an hour. He identified the problem, offered a solution, and gained the undivided attention of every person in that room. That day, Elias didn't just give a suggestion, he gave a masterclass. He proved a truth that most people spend their whole lives trying to ignore. He spoke simple English, and people respected him. Why do we find it so hard to be simple? If you are an English learner in a non-English speaking country, you probably feel a constant pressure. You feel like you are being judged. When you watch movies or listen to podcasts, you hear native speakers moving at light speed, using idioms you've never heard of. You think, if I want to be respected, I must sound like them. But let's look at the science of communication. When you use overly complex language, the listener's brain has to work twice as hard. They have to translate your big words into meaning, while also trying to follow your point. If you make people work too hard, they eventually stop listening. They might think you are smart, but they won't connect with you. True respect doesn't come from your vocabulary size. It comes from clarity. Think about the world's greatest leaders. Think about Steve Jobs or Martin Luther King Jr. Did they use the most difficult words possible? No. They used words that a 10-year-old could understand, but they delivered them with the weight of a mountain. Simplicity is not basic. Simplicity is a choice. It is the highest form of sophistication. Most of you listening to this are probably struggling with the wall. You know enough English to survive, but you are afraid to thrive. You stay silent in meetings. You avoid making phone calls. You don't post on social media because you're afraid someone will find a grammar mistake. You think to yourself, "My English is too simple. I sound like a child." I want to tell you right now that child-like simplicity is your superpower. When you speak simply, you are forced to be honest. You cannot hide behind flowery language. You have to say exactly what you mean. Elias, the man in our story, understood this. He didn't have the luxury of using big words, so he had to make sure his simple words were perfect. He focused on the soul of the message, rather than the decoration of the language. There is a myth that smart English equals complex English. This is a lie created by people who want to feel superior. In the professional world of 2026, time is the most valuable currency. If you can save someone's time by getting to the point quickly, they will love you for it. If you say, "I am currently in the process of evaluating the various options available to us," you are wasting time. If you say, "I am looking at our options," you are being a leader. People respect those who don't waste their time. They respect those who have the confidence to say, "I don't know," or "Tell me more," or "This is good." In this series, we are going to follow the journey of how simple became powerful. We are going to look at how Elias navigated a world that demanded complexity and how he rose to the top by refusing to give up his simple voice. If you have ever felt less than because your English isn't perfect, this is your wake-up call. We are going to break down the barriers of fear. We are going to show you that fluency isn't about how many words you know, but about how you use the words you already have. You don't need a bigger dictionary. You need a bigger heart and a clearer mind. The man who spoke simple English wasn't a genius of grammar. He was a genius of human connection. And by the end of this journey, you will realize that you can be that person too. Stay with me, because in the next segment, we are going to talk about the trap of perfection and why your mistakes might actually be the reason people start to trust you. Imagine a small seed buried deep in the ground. It tells itself, "I will not grow until I am sure I can be the tallest tree in the forest. I will not push through the dirt until I am certain my leaves will be a perfect shade of green." What happens to that seed? It never sprouts. It stays in the dark and eventually roasts in the soil. Many English learners are exactly like that seed. They are trapped in a prison called perfection. They believe that if their grammar isn't 100% correct, or if their accent isn't exactly like a native speaker's, they should stay silent. They wait for a perfect day to speak that never actually comes. While they are waiting to be perfect, life is passing them by. They lose jobs, they miss out on friendships, and they stay hidden in the shadows of their own fear. The man in our story, Elias, understood this trap very well. When he first started his journey, people laughed at him. He would say, "He go," instead of "goes," or he would mispronounce a difficult word. But he didn't stop. He realized that a language is not a test, it is a bridge. When you cross a bridge, you don't care if the stones are polished or if the paint is fancy. You only care if the bridge gets you to the other side of the river. English is the same. It is a vehicle to move your thoughts from your mind into the mind of another person. If you spend all your energy worrying about the paint of your grammar, you lose the bridge of your connection. Elias noticed that the people who tried too hard to be perfect often sounded like robots. Their voices lacked soul because they were too busy calculating rules in their heads. In the real world, whether in a boardroom in London or a cafe in New York, communication is about connection, not perfection. Most of the most successful people on earth are not native English speakers. If you watch a high-level tech meeting, you will hear people from all over the world speaking broken English, yet they are leading multi-billion-dollar companies. Why? Because they know that as long as the message is clear, the mistakes don't matter. The human brain is designed to look for meaning, not to act as a grammar checker. When you stop being afraid of making mistakes, a strange thing happens. You actually start speaking better. Your voice becomes natural. Your stress levels drop. You begin to sound like a human being instead of a textbook. To escape the trap of perfection, you must learn to love your mistakes. Elias used to say that every mistake was a sign of progress. If you make 10 mistakes today, it means you tried 10 times. The person who made no mistakes is the person who didn't try at all. In the USA and the UK, people actually respect someone who tries to speak their language despite the difficulty. They see your courage. They see your effort. They don't see your small errors. Perfection is an illusion that keeps you small, but good enough is the key that opens every door. By letting go of the need to be perfect, Elias became free. He spoke with his heart, and that is why people started to listen. He proved that a broken sentence delivered with confidence is 1,000 times more powerful than a perfect sentence delivered with fear. There is a common misunderstanding that if something is easy to understand, it must be shallow. We often believe that deep thoughts require heavy, complicated words. But if you look at the most influential people in history, you will find the exact opposite. Elias understood a secret that most scholars miss. Simplicity is the ultimate form of sophistication. To take a complex idea and break it down into small, digestible pieces is a sign of high intelligence. It shows that you understand the subject so well that you do not need to hide behind jargon. When Elias spoke, he did not use language to build a wall between himself and his audience. He used it to build a bridge. He knew that in places like the USA and the UK, people value their time above almost everything else. If you can say in 5 words what someone else says in 50, you are seen as more competent, more confident, and more respectful. Think about the difference between being impressive and being impactful. When you try to be impressive, you focus on yourself. You look for the longest words in the dictionary because you want people to think you are smart. But when you focus on being impactful, you focus on the other person. You ask yourself, what is the easiest way for them to understand me? This shift in mindset changes everything. People began to respect Elias because they felt he was talking with them, not at them. He used plain English, a style of communication that is highly prized in global business and leadership. While others were struggling to remember the definitions of complex terms, Elias was busy solving problems. He realized that the goal of speaking is not to show off your education, but to move an idea from your brain to someone else's. If the idea arrives safely and clearly, you have succeeded. This approach is especially powerful for those learning English as a second language. There is a certain kind of fake fluency where people use big words, but their logic is messy. Elias chose a different path. He mastered the core of the language. He knew that the most common 3,000 words in English cover about 95% of all daily conversations. Instead of trying to learn the other 5% of rare and difficult words, he practiced using those 3,000 words with absolute precision. This gave him a foundation that was unshakable. When you speak simply, you have fewer chances to make mistakes. You have more control over your tone and your pace. You can pause for effect. You can use your eyes to connect with your listeners. This level of control creates an aura of authority. People do not look at a person speaking simple English and think they are uneducated. They look at them and see someone who is so comfortable in their skin that they do not need to pretend. In every segment of society, from politics to technology, we are seeing a return to simplicity. The world is too noisy and too complicated. We are exhausted by information overload. In this environment, a person who speaks clearly is like a breath of fresh air. They stand out because they are the only ones making sense. Elias became a leader not because he knew the most words, but because he chose the best words. He understood that a simple, "I hear you," is often more powerful than a long speech about empathy. As you continue your own journey, remember that your simple English is not a limitation. It is a filter. It filters out the noise and leaves only the truth. It allows you to be heard in a world that is shouting. By choosing simplicity, you are not settling for less. You are mastering the art of being understood, and that is where true respect begins. As Elias grew more comfortable with his simple English, he discovered a secret weapon that many fluent speakers completely overlook. Because he wasn't constantly searching his mind for big words, his brain was free to do something much more important. He could truly listen. Most people in a conversation are not actually listening. They are merely waiting for their turn to speak. While the other person is talking, they are busy in their own heads, translating sentences, checking grammar rules, and trying to build a complex reply. Because they are so busy thinking, they miss the emotions, the body language, and the hidden needs of the person standing in front of them. Elias was different. He realized that since his vocabulary was simple, he didn't need much processing power to speak. This allowed him to give 100% of his attention to the speaker. In the fast-paced environments of London or New York, being a good listener is rarer than being a good speaker. People are drawn to those who make them feel heard. When Elias sat in a meeting, he would remain silent for long periods. He wasn't silent because he was afraid. He was silent because he was observing. When he finally did speak, his simple words hit the target like an arrow. Because he had listened so closely. His simple English was more relevant than the complex speeches of his peers. He would say things like, "I understand your worry," or "Let's try a different way." To the listener, these words felt incredibly powerful because they were born out of genuine attention. This is where the respect shifted from his language to his character. People began to realize that you don't need a massive vocabulary to be a leader. You just need to be present. For English learners, this is a life-changing realization. We often feel that if we don't talk a lot, people will think we don't know the language. So, we talk too much, we repeat ourselves, and we use filler words to hide our insecurity. But there is massive power in the pause. A person who is comfortable with silence is perceived as confident. Elias learned that if he didn't know the exact word for something, he didn't panic. He would simply pause, look the person in the eye, and use the simplest word possible. Often, that pause made the other person lean in closer. It created a rhythm to his speech that felt intentional and controlled. He wasn't chasing the language. He was letting the language work for him. He proved that respect is not earned by the sounds coming out of your mouth, but by the value you provide through your understanding. This stage of his journey taught him that communication is 50% speaking and 50% listening. But the listening part is what builds trust. When you speak simple English, you have the unique advantage of being an active listener. You can focus on the what instead of the how. You can catch the subtle details that others miss. Elias became the person people went to when they had a problem, not because he had the best English, but because he was the only one who actually heard what they were saying. He showed the world that a simple man who listens is far more valuable than a brilliant man who only hears his own voice. As you practice your English today, remember, don't just focus on being heard. Focus on hearing others. Your silence, followed by a simple, honest response, will win you more respect than 1,000 perfect sentences. Elias did not become a respected speaker by sitting in a traditional classroom or memorizing long lists of vocabulary from a textbook. He realized early on that the English taught in schools is often very different from the English spoken in the real world. In the streets of Chicago, the offices of London, or the markets of Singapore, English is a living, breathing thing. It is messy, it changes quickly, and it is full of rhythm. Elias decided to treat the entire world as his teacher. He stopped looking at English as a subject to be studied and started looking at it as a tool to be used. He understood that if you want to swim, you cannot just read about water, you have to jump into the pool. If you live in a non-English-speaking country, you might feel like you are at a disadvantage. You might think, if only I lived in New York, I would be fluent. But Elias proved that your environment is what you make of it. He began to immerse himself in the language through curiosity. He didn't just watch movies. He listened to how people expressed anger, joy, and doubt using simple words. He noticed that in movies, the most dramatic and powerful moments usually happen with very short sentences. He started reading children's books and comic strips, not because he was at a low level, but because those writers are masters of saying a lot with very little. He was training his brain to think in English patterns rather than translating from his native tongue. Translation is a slow, heavy process that makes your speech sound unnatural. By consuming simple English daily, Elias was teaching his mind to bypass the translation phase and go straight to the meaning. The secret to his growth was input before output. Before he tried to speak like a leader, he spent hundreds of hours listening to how leaders spoke. He would find interviews with successful people and notice how they explained their ideas. He saw that they didn't use academic language. They used stories. They used analogies. They used words that felt like home. Elias started to copy these patterns. He would repeat sentences out loud when he was alone, practicing the music of the language. He wasn't worried about the meaning of every single word. He was focused on the flow. He realized that if you get the rhythm right, people will understand you even if your grammar isn't perfect. English is a stress, timed language, and Elias mastered the art of stressing the important words while letting the smaller ones slide by. This journey taught him that consistency is more important than intensity. He didn't study for 10 hours once a week. He lived in English for 15 minutes every single day. He would narrate his own life in his head. I am making tea now. The water is hot. I am tired but happy. This simple habit built a direct connection between his actions and his English thoughts. By the time he had to speak in public, the words were already there, waiting for him. He didn't have to go looking for them. For anyone listening to this who feels stuck, remember Elias. You don't need a plane ticket to a foreign country to become fluent. You just need to open your ears to the world around you. Use the internet. Use your music. Use your own daily routines. If you bring English into your life in small, simple ways every day, the language will eventually stop feeling like a stranger and start feeling like a friend. While Elias was learning from the world, he realized that speaking a language is not just a mental task. It is a physical one. He treated English like a sport or a musical instrument. He noticed that many people know English in their heads, but their mouths cannot produce the sounds correctly because they haven't trained their muscles. To solve this, Elias started practicing in the shadows, away from the eyes of judgment. He spent time every morning speaking out loud to himself. He wasn't practicing complex speeches. He was simply describing his day. He would look in the mirror and explain his plans, his fears, and his goals. By doing this, he was building muscle memory. He was teaching his tongue, his lips, and his throat how to move through the English language without hesitation. When the time came to speak in a high-pressure situation, his mouth already knew what to do. The biggest hurdle Elias faced was the invisible audience. This is the feeling that everyone is watching you, waiting for you to stumble. To overcome this, he intentionally put himself in low-stakes situations where he could fail safely. He would strike up short conversations with strangers, ask simple questions in shops, or join online forums where people discussed hobbies in English. He wasn't trying to be the smartest person in the room. He was just trying to be a person who speaks. Every time he made a mistake and realized the world didn't end, his confidence grew. He learned that a mistake is not a stop sign, it is a feedback loop. If he said something wrong, and someone looked confused, he would simply try a different, simpler way to say it. This ability to pivot or change direction mid-sentence became his greatest strength. It made him look flexible and relaxed, rather than stiff and nervous. Elias also discovered the power of shadowing. He would listen to a short clip of a native speaker and try to repeat it exactly, mimicking the speed, the pauses, and the emotion. He wasn't trying to lose his accent, because he knew his accent was a part of his identity. Instead, he was focused on clarity and flow. He realized that in the globalized world of 2026, people don't care where you are from. They care if they can follow your train of thought. By shadowing simple, clear speakers, he learned where to breathe and where to emphasize. He found that speaking English with a steady rhythm was much more important than speaking it fast. In fact, he noticed that the most powerful speakers often speak quite slowly. They are not in a rush, because they know their words have value. This period of intense private practice transformed Elias. He was no longer a student trying to remember rules. He was a communicator who was ready for any situation. He had removed the thinking gap between his brain and his mouth. He showed that fluency is not about how many books you have read, but about how many times you have moved your jaw to the sounds of the language. If you are struggling today, stop studying more and start speaking more, even if it is just to the walls of your room. The man who spoke simple English became a master, because he wasn't afraid to look foolish in private, so that he could look powerful in public. He understood that the tongue is a muscle, and like any muscle, it only gets stronger when it is pushed to work. The journey of Elias brings us to a single, unavoidable truth. Your English is not a measure of your worth, but a tool for your purpose. We have seen how Elias transformed from a quiet observer into a respected leader, not by adding more complexity, but by stripping it away. He reached a point where he no longer felt the need to apologize for his simple words. He realized that the world doesn't need more people who sound like dictionaries. It needs more people who can look someone in the eye and speak from the heart. The respect he earned wasn't a reward for his grammar, it was a reward for his courage to be clear. When you finally accept that simple is enough, A heavy weight lifts off your shoulders. You stop performing, and you start connecting. As you move forward from this story, I want you to look at your own journey differently. If you are in a non-English speaking country, struggling to find your voice, remember that you already have everything you need. The vocabulary you have right now is enough to start a conversation, to share an idea, and to build a life. Don't let the fear of being basic keep you silent. Silence is the only thing that will truly hold you back. Every time you choose a simple word over a complex one, you are choosing clarity. Every time you speak despite your fear, you are building the muscle of confidence. The man who spoke simple English wasn't born with a special gift. He simply decided that being understood was more important than being impressive. The global landscape of 2026 belongs to the communicators, not just the experts. In the USA, the UK, and across the globe, the people who rise to the top are those who can simplify the complex. They are the ones who can speak to a room of 1,000 people and make every single person feel included. That is the power of simple English. It is inclusive. It is honest. It is universal. Your accent is a map of your history, and your simple sentences are a testament to your focus. Wear them with pride. Do not try to hide your origins. Instead, use your unique voice to bring something new to the table. Respect is earned when your actions match your words, and simple words make it very easy for people to see your truth. This is your invitation to step out of the shadows. Tomorrow, when you have the chance to speak, don't reach for the hardest word you know. Reach for the clearest one. Stand tall, take a breath, and remember Elias. Remember that the greatest ideas in human history, ideas like, "I have a dream," or "Let there be light," were spoken in the simplest of terms. Your voice has power. Your message has value. The world is waiting to hear what you have to say, and they don't care if you use a comma incorrectly. They are waiting for your spark, your energy, and your simple, honest English. Go out there and speak your truth. You will find that when you respect your own voice, the rest of the world will surely follow.